What's up, everybody? Welcome to Ransom Reviews, my first top 10 list for the books that I read in 2020. Today, we're looking at my science fiction list. I think I read 16 science fiction books in 2020, not counting short stories. And here is my top 10 list. At number 10, with a score of 7.7, The Long Way to a Small, Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. This book is different. It's not like anything I've read before. It's feel-good science fiction. Everybody's really nice, and there isn't a lot of conflict. It's almost like Firefly, James and the Giant Peach in space. There's a lot of social justice kind of stuff worked into this book. If you think that you would like that, sort of like interspecies mingling and gender stuff all wrapped up in a sci-fi cover, if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, I think you would love that book. If it sounds like something that would rub you the wrong way, you would probably not like it that much. That being said, I thought it was pretty cool, and I respected it for how different it was from most of the science fiction that I read. Just, you read about these people that are nice to each other in space and everyone gets along. And that was different and unique enough to make my top 10. At number 9, A Fire Upon the Deep by Vernor Vinge. Vernor Vinge, however you say his name. This also got a 7.7 score overall. It's a big, thick book, and it really had moments where I was completely captivated and absolutely loved it, and it had other moments that just felt like a slog to get through. It's hard to explain without giving away the plot, and I don't really want to, but it is a book jam-packed, filled with ideas about aliens and outer space. It's very epic in scale. It deals with the entire universe. It deals with also the minutia of a alien species that's very unique, pack-minded aliens, which was really interesting. But you almost have two separate storylines going, one on this planet with these aliens and one the broader scope of things in outer space, the different parts of the universe. It's a lot to chew on. And at times, like I said, I loved it. And at other times, I felt like it was just a hammer hitting me over the head. It is considered to be a science fiction classic. If you like space opera, if you like epic science fiction, big ideas, then I think you would really enjoy A Fire Upon the Deep. Number 8 on my list with a score of 8 overall is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. This is very different from the last book. This book was very easy to read. Like, I wish I could find a page for you that shows it. But sometimes he just has dialogue on the whole page, and the whole page ends up being like 150 words. Great. You can read this in a day or two. And it's got some really interesting concepts. It's got some really like heady science fiction ideas about time travel and the grandfather clause and all this interesting stuff, but it's written in a very like mystery and suspense, pennyback novel kind of way. Very easy to read, quick, fun, action-packed. So yeah, it's that weird dichotomy between it having like these deep, meaty ideas, but written in a very, very easy way, approachable. Like anyone could read this book, even if you're not that into science fiction. Number 7 on my list is Exhalation by Ted Chiang. Ted Chiang is one of my favorite science fiction authors. He is probably my favorite short story writer. And this is his second short story compilation. His first was much better, in my opinion, but this one is still really good. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed all the stories, but there wasn't really one that stood out to me. And that's what kind of left it just being a good book and not a great one. His previous volume, Stories of Your Life, which I have on the shelf behind me, has the self-titled Story of Your Life, which was made into the movie Arrival. If you've seen the movie Arrival, it came from Ted Chiang's short story, and it's probably my favorite short story ever. It's absolutely amazing. This one doesn't have a story that reaches those peaks, but it's still got some really interesting ideas. He's a very, very good short story writer. He totally understands how to put forth a unique and interesting idea and wrap it up quickly. Really, really good. Just not excellent. Number 6 on my list is another compilation of short stories, The Illustrated Man by Ray Bradbury. I hadn't read Ray Bradbury in a long, long time. And I'm glad I did, because there's some really fun stuff in here. Again, as most short story collections will be, it's uneven. There are some amazing stories like The Velt and The Rocket and a few others, and there are some ones that are pretty missable, which is why it got a score of 8 overall for me as well. I've actually reviewed this book on my channel already, so if you're interested in reading or learning or listening more about The Illustrated Man, you can check out the link that I'll put in the description of this video, and you can check out my full review. It's really nice science fiction. The way he writes is very breezy. It's not too sciencey. There isn't a lot of deep explanations about things, but there are a lot of good science fiction ideas. Number 5 on my list with a score of 8.5 is 11/22/63 by Stephen King. This, I guess this is science fiction. I decided to call this science fiction because it deals with time travel. Even though you don't necessarily think of Stephen King as a science fiction author, I counted it this time. This was my favorite Stephen King book that I've read in probably a decade, maybe more. I grew up reading Stephen King. He's actually my neighbor. Long story. Not that we hang out and drink beers in his backyard or anything, but I love Stephen King. But it's been a long time since I've read a book that I loved by Stephen King. And this was the first one. It basically, to sum it up very quickly, has to do with a man who travels back in time and tries to stop the John F. Kennedy assassination from happening in the hopes that it's going to create a better world. And I don't really want to talk too much more beyond that without spoiling it, but that is the premise of the book. It's very well written, very enjoyable, intriguing concept, especially if you care about the JFK assassination or time travel. But what I really liked about it was I've knocked Stephen King for so long for not being great at endings, at having these amazing premises. And he's such an incredible writer, and his characters are second to none. But his books always seem to peter out by the end, sort of lose their momentum. And I'm usually not that happy with how his books end. This, I think, has the best ending of any Stephen King book I've ever read. It was just so heartfelt and perfect in tone and rewarding, but not the happy ending. I don't want to say too much, but it's great. It's really, really great. It's definitely worth checking out. I also reviewed this book on my channel, a longer review. If you're interested in checking that out, see the description below. I think that's down there. Okay. Number 4 on my list is Zema Blue and Other Stories by Alastair Reynolds. And this got an 8.6 overall. Another collection of short stories. And again, uneven. But the ones that hit in this book really, really hit. In particular, the title, Zema Blue is a short story in this collection that has stuck with me for the entire year. A lot of the other stories have kind of faded from my memory, but for whatever reason, Zema Blue has stuck with me. And it's just, I don't know why. It's kind of a silly story, but it hit me like a ton of bricks. It really was weighty, and I thought about it for a long time, and I still think about it. Maybe that's in part because I've also seen the animated version. They did a animated version of it on Netflix's, what is it, Sex, Love, Robots, that short animated sci-fi series that they had. Zema Blue is one of the episodes on there. In fact, he has 2 short stories from this collection on that show if you want to check it out. The other one being Beyond the Aquila Rift, I think is what it is, which is really, really cool too. But Zema Blue is just, for me, that was enough to put that book towards the top of my list. Really, really good. Alastair Reynolds is a very science fiction guy. I think he was like an astrophysicist or something, and then decided to write science fiction. So some of his stuff can be really intense, but he's a really good writer, and some of the ideas that he has in this are really, really great. Worth checking out for sure. Okay, moving on to the top 3. Number 3, 2001, A Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke. And this book got an 8.7 overall for me. And I also have reviewed this book on my channel. Check the link below if you'd like to know more. I have some real hot takes on this book. I am definitely in the minority, I think, in that I liked the book more than I liked the movie. Sorry, Stanley Kubrick, but your movie, I understand how important it is for the science fiction genre and movies, but it kind of puts me to sleep. Whereas the book was fantastic. Completely captivated me all the way through. And one of the things that was really cool was the structure, which is not something I normally notice or even care about when I'm reading. But I couldn't help but notice when I was reading how each chapter was the perfect length, and how the end of each chapter would end with these little cliffhangers or these little winks and nods that were foreshadowing to the future. And it was just so well done. And it was a really cool thing to pick up on while I was reading, because like I said, I don't usually notice structure that much, or even want to notice it while I'm reading. But this book was structured excellently, and it's just a really well written book filled with ideas. If you've seen the movie, the concepts are all similar. Obviously, the delivery is much different. Definitely worth checking out. My last 2 were tough to separate. And honestly, I might flip them. But according to my scores, the number 2 science fiction book I read in 2020 was Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky. I have also reviewed this book on my channel. You know what to do. Everyone's talking about this book now, and I don't blame them. It's so good. It's how to even sum it up. It's basically about a species of uplifted spiders. And I know that might not sound great. I mean, I hate spiders, but I loved learning about these spiders and reading about them evolving as a species and going through their own revolutions and evolutions. And it's just captivating, utterly and completely captivating. And it really stuck with me. I mean, I've been preaching to everybody that reads science fiction to go get this book, to read this book, to check this book out. And I know a lot of other people feel the same. In fact, I think I have like 5 or 6. I have to look. 4 or 5 Tchaikovsky books now. I basically went on a binge after I read that book and bought like 3 or 4 or 5 more of his books. That's how impressed I was with the first book I've ever read by him, Children of Time. just really, really impressive science fiction. It's as good as science fiction gets, in my opinion. It belongs in that tier. And the only real complaint I had about it was that the human characters were just real crap. They were forgettable. But other than that, just fantastic stuff. If you haven't read it, you have to go find this book and check it out. I promise you, if someone who hates spiders as much as me can find themselves rooting for spiders by the end of this book, then for sure anybody could enjoy it. And my number one book for science fiction for 2020 is Ken Grimwood's Replay. This book scored a 9 out of 10 for me. If you've ever seen the movie Groundhog Day, this is kind of like Groundhog Day, except instead of repeating a day, he's repeating 30, 40 years of his life, something like that, until he dies, and then does it over again. He's stuck in a time loop. That is the premise of this story. And I just found it heartbreaking. I found it really affecting. The science fiction element was fascinating. I love the idea of a time loop. What would you do if you could go back 30 years and keeping the knowledge that you've already gained, live your life again? What would you do differently? What would you do the same? And then repeat that a dozen times or so. And yeah, I couldn't get away from reading this book. I was enjoying it the whole time. And like I said, it's quite morose at times. It's quite sad. There's a lot of unhappiness, just unfulfilled wishes, that kind of stuff. And I know there have been some complaints about this book that the author is like obsessed with women, that, you know, that like this character in his book just like has too much sex and is focused too much on finding a girlfriend, finding a wife, and all that. And yeah, I can totally understand that complaint. So like if you're a girl and you don't want to read about this character's male fantasies, then maybe you won't enjoy it as much as me. But for me, it's fiction. I'm reading about a fictional character. And while I certainly wouldn't make the same decisions that he made, I was completely captivated with the decisions that he was making. And, you know, not all of them are good. And that's what makes us human. And that's what made this book so human. And I found it really touching for his struggles and his attempts to reach out to people. And I just thought this book was fantastic. Really, really, really liked it. And it's just a timeless concept, the idea of being stuck in a time loop. It's been attempted many times. And I think that Ken Grimwood's Replay is arguably the best version of that I've read or watched or witnessed. So definitely worth checking out. So that is my top 10 list of science fiction books for 2020. I do have a couple of honorable mentions. A Closed and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers. This is the second book in her series. I didn't like it quite as much as I did the first one, but it was still had parts of it that I enjoyed. And the Strugatsky brothers, who are considered to be the best Russian science fiction authors. Roadside Picnic is probably their most famous book. I liked it. I did not love it. But for some reason, I've bought like 2 or 3 more of their books because they were on sale, because that's what I do. So we're going to give them another shot. Also on the honorable mentions list was Alastair Reynolds' House of Suns, which I really liked, but also completely struggled with because it was just so long and epic and immense. And I listened to it on audiobook, so I don't have it with me. It was okay. It's considered, again, to be one of these really high tier science fiction books, but I've realized that my taste in science fiction is not the same as everybody else's. I kind of struggle with the epic, intensely sciencey science fiction books like that. In fact, we'll get to that in a moment with my not so hot list, which starts with Peter F. Hamilton's Pandora's Star. Peter F. Hamilton is one of these guys who writes epic, long, oh my God, is it long? Oh my God. And it's very sciencey. It's very intense. It's very epic space opera kind of stuff. And I really did not like it. I didn't like it. I'll say it. I did not like it. I'm sorry, Peter F. Hamilton. I know that you're very popular. I did not like it. And I'm worried because I have a few more Peter F. Hamilton books on my shelf right behind me, and I don't have the motivation to ever read them now. And then Sleeping Giants, which I also just really cool premise, but just the writing and the delivery of it was just very meh for me. And another science epic kind of writer, Ian M. Banks, Against a Dark Background. I don't want to say that I hated this book, but it's pretty close. It's pretty close to hate. And I know that's going to get me in hot water with some science fiction fans, but I just really, really, really didn't like it. This is going to be on another list coming up shortly. Spoiler alert. So there you have it. Out of the 16 books that I read, the ones that I loved, the ones I liked, the ones I did not like, and the ones that I really, really did not like. I hope you enjoyed the video and stick around for more book reviews on Ransom Reviews.